4 caves, 4 tragedies, 4 stories of human courage in the face of overwhelming odds. What drives explorers to venture where no light has ever touched? What happens when the thin line between adventure and disaster suddenly vanishes? And what can these harrowing experiences teach us about the limits of human endurance? Some caves hold ancient bones, others hide endless tunnels. But in September 1984, Sterkfontein Cave in South Africa held something far more chilling. 3 experienced divers went in to map its dark waters, carrying only ropes, lights, and their diving gear. But curiosity would turn their simple mission into one of the most haunting survival stories ever told. In 1984, cave diver Nuno Gomes was exploring the dark tunnels of Sterkfontein Caves in South Africa. These caves were special. Scientists had found ancient human bones there, including a skeleton over 2 million years old. While most people studied the dry parts of the caves where these old bones were found, Gomes was interested in something different. For months, he had been swimming through the cave's underwater passages that nobody had mapped before. With his diving gear and waterproof lights, he carefully made his way through the flooded tunnels, wondering what he might discover. These waters were mysterious. No one knew how far they went or what secrets they held. Gomes didn't know it then, but his next dive would turn into a fight for survival that would be remembered for years to come. On September 29, 1984, Gomes wasn't diving alone. He had a plan: to put a strong rope line through the underwater caves of Milner Hall. This rope would help future divers find their way through the dark tunnels without getting lost. 2 other cave explorers, Peter Verhul and Malcolm Keeping, were there to help him. Their job was important. They would stay at the cave entrance, slowly feeding out the rope line as Gomes swam deeper into the flooded tunnels. They would also keep track of time and make sure Gomes stayed safe. As they checked their equipment one last time, none of them could have guessed that this ordinary Saturday morning would soon turn into a desperate rescue mission. Gomes knew these underwater tunnels well. He had swum through them twice in the past month, so he felt confident. The path was clear in his mind: 396 feet from Milner Lake's entrance, through a narrow passage, ending at a small air-filled space where divers could catch their breath. First, he would swim through alone, setting up the rope line. Then, if all went well, he planned to take Peter and Malcolm on what should have been an easy dive to show them the route. After all, with the new rope line in place, they would just need to follow it to reach the air pocket at the end. The dive started perfectly. Gomes moved smoothly through the dark water, unwinding the rope as he went. But in these caves, even the simplest plans can go wrong in seconds. Finally, they reached the small air pocket at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't much, just a narrow space about 3 feet wide and 10 feet long, barely bigger than a hallway closet. The 3 men removed their masks, their lights casting strange shadows on the wet limestone walls. As they caught their breath, they looked around in wonder. Could ancient humans have stood in this very spot millions of years ago? Maybe their footprints were still hidden somewhere in these caves? The thought gave them goosebumps. Each tunnel and corner might hide ancient bones or tools, waiting to be discovered. Gomes, Peter, and Malcolm shared excited whispers in that tiny space, their voices echoing off the ancient walls. None of them knew that these would be their last words together. In just a few minutes, their exciting adventure would turn into a desperate fight for life. The way back should have been easy. The tunnel was only 13 feet deep, and their new rope line showed them exactly where to go. Gomes led the way, with Malcolm and Peter following behind him. Suddenly, Gomes felt Malcolm grab his fin. He turned around to see Malcolm's worried face in the beam of his underwater light. Malcolm's hand signals told the scary news. Peter wasn't behind them anymore. Gomez's heart jumped. He swam back, searching the murky water. Then he saw it, the faint glow of Peter's flashlight coming from one of the side tunnels. Gomes felt a flash of anger. He knew how tempting these unexplored passages could be, but breaking away from the group was dangerous. He quickly signaled to Peter to return to the main line. Peter swam back, and they started moving toward the exit again. But this small delay would soon lead to something much worse than anyone could imagine. They were almost out. Just one narrow passage left before reaching the open lake room. But something was wrong. Peter had vanished again. Gomes and Malcolm looked around quickly, their lights cutting through the dark water. With no sign of Peter, they decided to swim out to the lake room. Maybe, they thought, Peter had found another way out. But when they broke through to the surface, the lake room was silent. No bubbles, no light beams, no Peter. The cave's dark waters had swallowed their friend. Gomez and Malcolm didn't waste a second. They grabbed fresh air tanks and went back into the tunnel, following their rope line. Gomez swam into every side tunnel he knew about, hoping to catch a glimpse of Peter's light. But there was nothing, just dark, silent water. For 4 long hours, they searched back and forth. Each time they swam through the tunnel, their movements stirred up more mud from the bottom. The water got cloudier and cloudier, making it harder to see, but they didn't give up. They believed Peter must have found one of the many air pockets hidden in the side passages. He had to be waiting somewhere. They just had to find the right tunnel. Finally, their air tanks were empty. With heavy hearts, they had to swim back and call for help. The local fire brigade arrived as the sun was setting, but they couldn't help. Cave diving was too dangerous for regular rescue divers. One wrong turn in these twisted tunnels could trap them too. Time was running out, and Peter was still somewhere in the darkness below. As darkness fell, help arrived. Craig Stevenson, another cave diver who knew these tunnels, joined Gomez for one more desperate search. They put on fresh air tanks and went back into the murky waters. But after 15 hours of searching, things had only gotten worse. The water was now like black coffee, impossible to see through. Gomez and Malcolm could barely move, shaking from the cold after being in the water since morning. When they finally came out at 2 a.m., they had been diving for 15 straight hours. The police divers had taken over, but even they gave up for the night. Their words hit like stones. They weren't looking for a survivor anymore. Now, they were searching for a body. In those final moments, Peter couldn't resist the cave's call. Each dark tunnel they passed whispered of mysteries waiting to be found. Ancient bones? Hidden chambers? New passages no one had seen before? The thoughts filled his mind as they swam toward the exit. The first time he snuck away to peek down a side tunnel, Gomez had caught him and pulled him back. As they swam past tunnel after tunnel, Peter made a choice that would cost him everything. He turned away from his friends one last time and swam into the darkness. His light beam cut through the black water as he moved deeper into the unexplored passage, not knowing he would never find his way back. Up, down, left, right. In the darkness, it was hard to tell which way led out. Unlike walking in a building where you can look back at your footsteps, these water-filled tunnels left no trail. One wrong turn, and every passage started to look like the right way home. Every tunnel Peter tried led nowhere. As he swam, his movements stirred up the soft mud on the walls, making the water cloudy. His heart beat faster, as nothing looked familiar anymore. Then, above him, he saw it, a silver gleam of air. He kicked upward and broke through the surface, gasping with relief. He had found an air pocket, a tiny room no human had ever seen before. The excitement of discovery mixed with his fear of being lost. Peter knew what he had to do now. Stay put, don't move. His friends would come looking for him. All he had to do was wait. In the beam of his flashlight, he began to study his shelter, not knowing this amazing discovery would become his prison. Through his flashlight beam, Peter saw more tunnels branching off his tiny refuge. As an experienced cave explorer, he would normally be thrilled to check where they led, but not now, not without ropes and his team. He shone his light into the dark water below, hoping to signal his friends. Surely they would see it. Surely they would find him. But minutes stretched into hours. The water in front of him stayed perfectly still. No bubbles rising to the surface. No beams of light cutting through the darkness. No sound except his own breathing, echoing off the wet walls. For the first time, Peter realized just how alone he was. Peter clicked off his flashlight, saving its last 30 minutes of power for when he really needed it. In complete darkness, he thought about his options. The rule every cave diver knew was simple. If you have air to breathe, stay where you are. Wait for rescue. Using his last air tank and light to search blindly through the tunnels would be too dangerous. If he couldn't find his way back to this air pocket, he would be trapped underwater with no air and no light. At least here, he could breathe. Peter tried everything he could think of. He banged his air tank against the rock walls, hoping someone would hear. He flashed his light into the water whenever he thought he heard something. But as his energy drained away, exhaustion took over. Finally, he couldn't fight sleep any longer. When he woke in the total darkness, Time had lost all meaning. Had he slept for minutes? Hours? There was no way to know. In his mind, one terrible question kept repeating. How long would he have to wait in this darkness before someone found him? If they found him at all. Above ground, things were getting worse. The police had closed off the entire cave. No one was allowed in, not even rescue divers. The water was too cloudy from all the searching, and they needed it to clear. But the police made a terrible mistake. Believing they were only looking for a body, they waited a whole week before coming back. When they finally returned, they searched the bottom of every tunnel they could find, but they found nothing. No body, no equipment, no sign of Peter at all. 7 days had passed, and they still didn't know the truth. Peter was alive, waiting in his pitch-black air chamber. The next weekend, rescue teams came back again, but would they search in the right place this time? After 2 weeks of waiting, Gomez couldn't take it anymore. The police had kept all civilian divers out of the search, but Gomez knew these tunnels better than anyone. He had to try one more time. On the 16th day after Peter disappeared, Gomez showed up at Sterkfontein caves, offering to help the police divers. His heart was heavy. Even if Peter had found air, the cold water would have killed him by now, or so everyone thought. Gomez just wanted to find his friend's body, to give Peter's family some peace. He knew all the hidden corners where a body might be trapped. But at that very moment, in a tiny air pocket somewhere in the flooded maze, Peter was still alive, still waiting, still hoping someone would find him before it was too late. While his flashlight still worked, he had spotted some tunnels that seemed to lead away from the water. Now, feeling his way in total darkness, he followed one of these passages. For about 120 feet he crawled, hoping it might lead to freedom. But his heart sank when his hands found only solid rock, a dead end. He had no choice but to feel his way back to the water's edge. All he had left were pathetic scraps of survival, his now useless flashlight, which he turned into a drinking cup, some dead batteries, and his diving tank still full of air. In the endless darkness, he could only wait and hope that somewhere, somehow, someone was still looking for him. But would anyone find him before it was too late? Now he was too weak to even try swimming out. His muscles had wasted away from weeks without food, his body eating itself to stay alive. The thick beard growing on his face told him that many days had passed, though he couldn't know how many. Most of the time, he slept. Without food or light, his body shut down more and more. After weeks in darkness, Peter was barely alive. He had lost 44 pounds, his body slowly eating itself to survive. He lay by the water's edge, too weak to move, waiting for diving lights to break through the darkness. But rescue wouldn't come from the water as he expected. For 6 long weeks, police divers searched the flooded tunnels every weekend. Finding nothing, they finally gave up. They reopened the dry parts of the cave, but kept the underwater sections closed. That's when hope came from an unexpected place. A group of local cave explorers, led by Roger Ellis, had a different idea. Instead of searching underwater, they would look for paths connecting the dry caves to the flooded ones. Gomez, still desperate to find his friend, joined their team. Hours into the search, Gomez made an amazing discovery. He found a passage that led to water, proof that the dry caves connected to the flooded tunnels. Then other searchers spotted footprints in the mud, leading to a dead end. Their hearts raced. Could it be? Then Roger Ellis found something that would haunt him forever. At the edge of a water pool lay Peter Verhel. His body was skin and bones, his face covered in weeks of beard growth. Next to him lay his diving tank, badly dented from being used to signal for help. Peter hadn't drowned that September day. He had survived for nearly a month in complete darkness, hoping each day would bring rescue. He had found an air pocket, just as Gomez thought. But in a cruel twist of fate, the police's decision to close the caves had sealed his fate. By the time they reopened the dry caves and found him, it was too late. The Sterkfontein cave tragedy changed cave diving forever. New safety rules were created. Better rescue plans were made. The recovery team treated Peter's body with deep respect as they carried him out of the cave that had become his final resting place. His death changed the cave diving world forever. Peter's story, of a moment's curiosity leading to weeks of darkness and isolation, became a powerful lesson for cave divers everywhere. Today, Peter's story serves as a silent warning. Even the most experienced explorer can get lost in these underwater mazes. Never leave the safety line. Never dive alone. Never let curiosity overcome caution. Today, when cave divers clip their safety lines and check their air tanks, many think of Peter. His story reminds them that beneath the Earth's surface, in the dark waters of underwater caves, there is no room for mistakes. One moment of curiosity, one brief departure from safety rules, can lead to tragedy. In the end, Peter's story became a powerful reminder that in the world of cave diving, following safety rules isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about making sure you come home to the people waiting for you. After Peter's tragic end in South Africa's Sterkfontein cave, we move to America's heartland. In Texas, Jacob's Well looks beautiful from above, clear water inviting swimmers to jump in. But below the surface, hidden chambers wait in darkness. In 1983, 2 young divers ignored their teacher's warnings and entered these deadly waters, not knowing that their training wouldn't be enough to save them from what waited in the deep. When years of diving experience meet an underwater cave's dark secrets, confidence can become a deadly trap. What seems like a simple dive can quickly become a fight for survival. Even the most skilled can find themselves at nature's mercy. This is the Jacob's Well diving tragedy, one of the darkest chapters from tragic histories. November 1983. At Texas State University, 2 experienced divers, Richard Patton and Clark McConnell, were on their way to becoming diving instructors. Their mentor was Don Dibble, a master diving instructor whose 20 years of experience included rescue diving and service in the Navy. Don knew the deadly side of diving better than most. Among all his safety lessons, one warning stood out: stay away from Jacob's Well. This underwater cave system, just 30 minutes from campus, looked peaceful on the surface, but held deadly secrets in its depths. Despite his years of experience and countless rescue missions, even Don feared what lurked in those underwater tunnels. But some warnings, no matter how serious, go unheeded. From above, Jacob's Well looks like the perfect swimming spot. Its opening, as wide as a small car, shows off water so clear you can count pebbles at the bottom. Every day, swimmers take happy plunges into its 25-foot depths, as pure water bubbles up from below at 1,000 gallons each minute. But these smiling swimmers don't know what waits beneath their feet. Just below this peaceful surface sits one of the deadliest underwater cave systems anyone has ever found. In these waters, the line between adventure and disaster is thinner than a diver's safety rope. Beyond the inviting surface, Jacob's Well reveals its true nature. A steep gravel slope, dropping at a dangerous 45-degree angle, leads to a network of underwater caves that few have fully explored. 3 chambers have been mapped, each one darker and tighter than the last. The first chamber stretches 30 feet deep, the second reaches 80 feet, and the third plunges to 120 feet below ground. But it's the mysterious 4th chamber that turns brave divers into nervous whispers. At more than 150 feet deep, its narrow tunnels have turned back even the most skilled cave divers. Those who know its history call it the Dead Man's Passage, and in 1983, it would prove exactly why. In the spring of 1979, master diver Don Dibble descended into Jacob's Well on what would become his darkest mission yet. 2 cave divers, Kent Mopin and Mark Brasher, had vanished into the 4th chamber. A sudden cave-in had sealed their only escape route with tons of shifting gravel, turning the chamber into their underwater tomb. The recovery mission was a nightmare, even for Dibble's 20 years of experience. Mark's body stayed hidden until 1981, when the well's powerful current finally released him from the depths. But Kent's body remained trapped behind that wall of gravel, lost in total darkness at 150 feet below the surface, where it would stay for the next 20 years, a grim reminder of the well's deadly power. After losing 2 young lives, Don Dibble was determined to prevent more deaths. In January 1980, he led a team to seal off the deadly 4th chamber. They worked for 3 days straight, pouring 1,000 pounds of concrete and installing steel rebar bars across the narrow entrance. Don thought he had finally won his battle against the well's deadly pull. But just 2 weeks later, he discovered something that chilled him to the bone. Someone had smashed through his barrier, carving a hole just big enough for a diver to squeeze through. Next to the destroyed barrier was a handwritten note that would haunt Don forever. "You can't keep us out." These words would become a deadly warning of what was about to happen. Don tried everything to stop Richard and Clark. He even told them about the day he nearly died in those same caves, a story that still gave him nightmares. It happened in the tight passage to the fourth chamber, barely 2 feet wide. At 150 feet below surface, the loose gravel had suddenly shifted, pinning his arms against his body. His air gauge showed just 5 minutes left, as thousands of pounds of gravel pressed in from every side. For 3 terrifying minutes, Don fought for his life in complete darkness. His thrashing finally cleared just enough space to squeeze free. He had escaped with less than 2 minutes of air left, a survival story few get to tell in Jacob's Well. But Don's terrifying story had the opposite effect. Instead of scaring them away, it lit a dangerous spark in Richard and Clark's minds. Where Don saw certain death, they saw an irresistible challenge. Like so many divers before them, they mistook the well's warnings for an invitation. They were about to learn why Don's warnings were written in lives lost. Despite all the warnings, Richard and Clark made the decision that would cost them everything. They would enter the fourth chamber. Their certification in open water diving had given them confidence, but cave diving played by different rules. It wasn't just about swimming. Every piece of equipment could mean the difference between life and death. They needed safety lines to mark their path in the darkness, special frog kick techniques to avoid stirring up blinding clouds of silt, and backup air supplies. Most importantly, they needed a carefully planned exit route. In cave diving, there's an old saying, "The way in is easy, the way out decides if you live." At 8:30 p.m., November 23rd, 1983, Richard and Clark entered Jacob's Well under the cover of darkness. The temperature was a chilly 68 degrees, the same temperature the well maintains year-round. They glided easily through the first chamber at 30 feet, then the second at 80 feet. The water was crystal clear, giving them a false sense of security. But with each foot they descended, they broke another sacred rule of cave diving. No safety lines to guide them back, no backup air tanks, no proper cave diving training. The well's darkness seemed to swallow their flashlight beams whole. In the next few minutes, they would learn why no safety rule in cave diving was written without blood. At 150 feet below the surface, they faced the deadly fourth chamber's entrance, a gap barely 24 inches wide. Richard made a decision that would seal his fate. He unstrapped his air tank, the only thing keeping him alive in these depths. The rules of cave diving were clear: never remove your lifeline. Seconds turned to minutes in the darkness. Then suddenly, Richard came bursting back through the gap. His eyes were wide with terror behind his mask, hands desperately reaching out. His air tank was gone, lost somewhere in the black void of the fourth chamber. Now, 2 lives depended on 1 tank with just 15 minutes of air left. In the cold darkness, Clark shared his regulator, their last connection to life. In the underwater caves, this buddy breathing technique demands absolute calm, but calm is hard to find when you're running out of air. Just 30 feet from the surface, with their air gauge flashing red, they spotted what looked like moonlight above, a tunnel to safety. But Jacob's Well had one final, deadly trick. The passage was a false chimney, a natural trap that had claimed lives before. With only minutes of air left, panic began to set in. Clark realized the terrible mistake. He turned back 20 feet through the darkness, found the true exit, and shot to the surface at 9:15 p.m. His lungs burned as he gulped the cold night air. But Richard wasn't behind him. In those final moments of confusion, his friend had chosen the wrong path. Those 20 feet, just 6 small kicks of a fin, became the distance between life and death. In the black waters below, Richard's final breaths echoed through the same caves that had already claimed so many others. At 9:30 p.m., Clark's desperate call pierced the quiet night. When Don Dibble's phone rang, the words he heard confirmed his worst fear. The victims were his own students. He had spent years warning them about these caves, sharing his nightmares, building barriers. Now he would have to bring one of them home. On Thanksgiving morning, as families across Texas gathered for celebration, Don led his recovery team into the dark waters. At 10:45 a.m., they found Richard's body in the false chimney, his flashlight still clutched in his hand. He was just 15 feet from the exit, close enough to have heard the world above, but trapped in an eternal darkness. This November 1983 tragedy was just another chapter in Jacob's Well's dark history, but in these caves, the worst was yet to come. The memory of Richard's death was still fresh when in June 1984, Don Dibble received another dreaded call. Wayne Russell, an experienced diver, had vanished into the fourth chamber. Once again, Don would have to face the darkness that had already taken so many. At 150 feet down, in the same passages where he'd lost his students, they found Wayne's body. The fourth chamber had claimed its third victim in 5 years. For Don, each recovery mission carved deeper scars. 3 times he had descended into these waters to bring back those who didn't heed his warnings. 3 times he had to face the families waiting above. By 1985, Hays County Parks Department had seen enough death. They welded a heavy metal grate across the well's throat, 40 feet below the surface. Only one professional diving team was given permission to venture beyond it. The same caves that had claimed so many lives were finally locked away. Today, Jacob's Well's true toll remains uncertain, somewhere between 8 and 12 lives lost in its depths. Every day, hundreds of visitors lean over its crystal-clear waters, taking photos and swimming in the safe shallows. Few realize they're looking into a graveyard of broken rules and fatal decisions. The spring still pumps out its 1,000 gallons per minute, clear as glass, beautiful as ever. But beneath the grate, in the darkness below, the fourth chamber keeps its secrets, along with the stories of those who ventured too deep, chasing mystery but finding mortality. This was the Jacob's Well diving tragedy, where experience met its fatal match. After the tragedy at Jacob's Well in Texas, we journey to Utah's mountains. In 2005, 5 young friends found Gollum Cave on Y Mountain near Provo. What started as an exciting night adventure quickly turned deadly when they entered the cave's underwater tunnel. Only one of the 5 would make it back to tell their story, a chilling reminder that some caves hide dangers impossible to see until it's too late. In August 2005, 5 young adults decided to embark on what they thought would be a thrilling adventure. Their destination was a little-known underwater cave on the side of Y Mountain in Provo, Utah. Locals had given it an ominous nickname, the Cave of Death. Drawn by the cave's mystery and challenge, the group entered, unaware of the deadly danger awaiting them inside. They couldn't have known then, but only one of them would ever return from this journey. This is the tragic story of the Gollum Cave tragedy. What would drive 5 friends to explore a cave so dangerous that it had already left many with bruises and broken bones? On Wednesday, August 17th, 5 friends went out for dinner and started talking about a secret cave on the side of Y Mountain. The cave was known to many local students, especially those from the nearby Brigham Young University campus. A year earlier, 2 young explorers had fully surveyed Gollum's cave, but it wasn't very welcoming. The entrance was covered in a foot of water and only 4 feet tall, forcing anyone entering to crouch through a 100-foot tunnel filled with a shallow stream. For most people, this wouldn't sound like fun, but for those who knew about the cave, it was a tempting challenge. The most dangerous part of this cave involved lowering yourself through a small water-filled hole just 18 by 24 inches wide. Even for those who knew what lay beyond, this moment was enough to make even the bravest explorers hesitate. But that night, the group was determined to test themselves. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning by the time they reached the cave. After sitting outside for a while to gather their courage, they finally ventured into the shallow entrance. Jennifer Gilbreth, the only one who had been through the cave before, tried to reassure the others. She explained that they just needed to hold their breath and swim the short 15 feet to reach the next chamber. Despite having suffered from hypothermia and even passing out on her last visit, she was still eager to share this secret and dangerous spot with her friends. Would you dare enter a pitch-black water-filled tunnel, knowing that a single wrong move could trap you forever? Blake Donner, Scott McDonald, and Ariel Singer decided to go for it, while their 5th friend, Joseph Ferguson, chose to stay outside the main cave and wait for them to return. With only a single flashlight between them, the 4 friends approached the small opening in the floor of the cave. By now, it was 4:30 in the morning, and the world outside was completely dark. One by one, they built up the courage to lower themselves into the narrow, cold passage. Jennifer, being the only one who had been there before, went first. The others watched as her head disappeared under the water, followed by a small ripple as she swam through to the other side. The tunnel was incredibly tight, no bigger than a refrigerator door, just 2 feet wide and 4 feet high. One after another, Blake, Scott, and Ariel dropped into the water and followed the path Jennifer had shown them. There was a rope attached to a rock in the main cave, leading through the underwater tunnel, and tied to a piece of wood in the inner cave. In such a small, cramped tunnel, the group probably didn't think the rope was necessary to guide them back to the entrance. After all, it seemed like you couldn't miss the exit. Unfortunately, that assumption had proven wrong before. Brian Lamprey, a previous explorer of the cave, once shared his experience of overshooting the exit hole on his way back. He had missed it by just 4 feet and ended up hitting a dead end. In that terrifying moment, he realized he was surrounded by solid rock. Panicking, he desperately pushed backward, feeling along the ceiling until he finally found the exit hole. The extra time it took made him certain he was about to drown. He only managed to find the hole and escape just a split second before his lungs gave out and he gasped for air. What would you do if your friends vanished into a cave, and after an hour there was no sign of them? On this day, all 4 friends had successfully made the short 15-foot swim to the inner cave. Inside, they found a small space where they could stand and move around, though only slightly. The cave itself was about 6.5 feet tall, with a peak at the center reaching 9 feet. This left only about 3 feet of air above the water. Meanwhile, Joseph waited outside, unsure of how long his friends intended to stay inside the cave. No clear plan had been set, so he simply waited. After nearly an hour with no sign of the group or their flashlight, Joseph grew concerned. He walked into the cave and looked at the water-filled hole, but saw no movement. It was now 5:30 a.m. and uncertainty began to creep in. Unsure of what else to do, he called a few friends who knew the cave well. When he still couldn't get answers, he eventually called the police at 6:25 a.m. What if the air you were breathing, instead of saving you, was silently suffocating you? When the group swam into the inner cave, they were likely nervous and out of breath, their hearts racing with adrenaline. As their faces broke the surface of the water, they probably took deep, relieved breaths. Unfortunately, the air they inhaled wasn't safe. In caving, the term bad air refers to air that lacks the normal balance of 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen, with only trace amounts of other gases. In this small, stagnant cave, with its closed water source, carbon dioxide buildup was highly likely. As they spent more time in the inner chamber, the oxygen would have gradually been depleted and carbon dioxide would have steadily increased, making the air more dangerous to breathe with each passing minute. Carbon dioxide is also known to build up in limestone caves due to natural erosion and the seepage of gases from decaying plant matter. Additionally, there was evidence that candles had been burned inside the cave, further depleting the already limited oxygen supply. With no airflow to circulate the air, carbon dioxide would have settled, concentrating closer to the water level. This buildup would have happened gradually, so the friends likely had no idea that the air in the inner chamber was becoming increasingly toxic. Even if they had only stayed in the cave for a few minutes, their ability to think, move, and breathe would have been severely impacted, making the return swim through the narrow passage a far more dangerous task than they could have imagined. What if every breath you took in a desperate escape was pushing you closer to unconsciousness? Once inside the cave, the group may have quickly realized something was wrong. Breathing, coughing became difficult, and they likely understood they needed to leave immediately. However, the entrance hole was so small that only one person could pass through at a time. Jennifer, being the first to enter, tried to exit first, but struggled to find the hole before running out of breath. Her ability to hold her breath and think clearly would have been severely impaired due to the lack of oxygen in the cave. If the oxygen levels had dropped to around 10% to 12%, Jennifer would have had less than 60 seconds before passing out. Without the rope firmly in her grasp, finding the small exit hole would have been a desperate, frantic attempt. Feeling along the ceiling of the tunnel for a way out before it was too late. Inside the cave, the other 3 had no idea that Jennifer was in a desperate fight for her life. They remained in the suffocating, stagnant air, waiting for their turn to exit. After 30 or 60 seconds, it was Ariel's turn. Unaware of Jennifer's struggle, she began preparing to leave. With the carbon dioxide levels rising to 2 or 3%, her breathing would have sped up, her body instinctively trying to compensate for the lack of oxygen. Taking deep breaths, she slid her face under the water and pushed herself forward with a final burst of energy. But instead of finding the clear passage she expected, Ariel felt the body of her friend blocking the narrow, dark tunnel, in a space so tight that 2 people couldn't fit through together. The realization would have been terrifying. Her way out was obstructed, and there was no room to move past. How do you keep calm when every second spent in darkness brings you closer to tragedy? In a moment of panic, Ariel would have desperately tried to get air, likely not fully realizing that Jennifer was unconscious and close to death. Meanwhile, Blake and Scott were left in the dark, breathing the increasingly toxic air for several more minutes. With oxygen levels dropping and carbon dioxide rising, both would have started feeling the effects: dizziness, confusion, and rising panic as their environment became harder to survive in. Blake, entering the narrow, water-filled tunnel next, was already in a weakened state. Pushing himself to swim quickly, he would have been startled to encounter Ariel and Jennifer still floating in the water ahead of him. Instantly alarmed and confused, he may have tried to figure out why they weren't moving. The exit hole should have been right in front of Ariel, but she wasn't going anywhere. In that moment, Blake may have realized that Ariel wasn't conscious and tried to push her toward the exit in an attempt to save her. But in such a tight tunnel, only 2 feet wide and 4 feet deep, moving past or even pushing someone forward would have been almost impossible. Can you imagine waiting in total darkness, knowing that each breath could be your last? The last caver, left alone in the dark inner chamber, would have been suffering the longest. Breathing the stagnant, toxic air, he was likely feeling the full effects of oxygen deprivation and panic. Eager to escape, he finally began his journey through the tunnel, but his attempt to leave would have been tragically cut short when he encountered the bodies of his friends ahead. In such a weakened state, he may have quickly lost consciousness, unable to push past or help anyone. When authorities arrived, the rescue operation was far from simple. They immediately began pumping fresh air into the cave, hoping to restore oxygen levels, while simultaneously pumping out water to create a larger air pocket within the connecting tunnel. Once the water levels dropped, the first grim discovery was made: Jennifer Galbraith's body floating just inside the tunnel. After another hour of pumping, rescuers found the remaining 3 friends, Ariel, Blake, and Scott, together, all facing toward the exit hole they were never able to reach. From the evidence found at the scene, along with the information provided by Joseph Ferguson and the autopsies confirming drowning as the cause of death, a clearer picture of the tragedy emerges. Accounts from other explorers who had faced difficulties in the same tunnel reinforced the idea that the air quality played a significant role in the incident. It's difficult to imagine how 4 healthy young adults, all between 18 and 28 years old, could have drowned in such a short span of just 15 feet if the air hadn't been dangerously compromised. These were bold individuals in the prime of their lives, and yet, one by one, they succumbed to the deadly conditions inside the cave. After their bodies were recovered, authorities made the decision to fill the cave entrance with concrete to prevent any further tragedies and to ensure that no more lives would be lost in the depths of Gollum's cave. After the tragedy at Gollum Cave in Utah, our final story takes us to England's Yorkshire countryside. In 1967, 6 skilled cavers entered Mossdale Caverns, not knowing that nature was about to unleash its fury. What happened next would become Britain's worst caving disaster. A stark reminder that sometimes, even experience isn't enough when facing the unpredictable forces of the underground world. Imagine being deep underground in total darkness. Water whistle rising relentlessly around you, cutting off every escape route. This was the horrifying reality for 6 brave cavers trapped in Mossdale Caverns. What began as a thrilling exploration quickly turned into a terrifying battle for survival. Discover their harrowing journey and the heroic rescue attempts in a story of unimaginable courage and heartbreaking loss. This is the Mossdale Caverns tragedy. On June 24, 1967, a group of 6 experienced cavers went on an adventure of cave exploration into Mossdale Caverns in North Yorkshire, England. The 6 cavers who embarked on this journey were experienced and passionate about exploring caves. Their names were John Ogden, Jeff Workman, Bill Frakes, Michael Ryan, Colin Vickers, and Graham Holmes. They were part of the Leeds University Speleological Association. John Ogden, the leader of the group, was known for his dedication and passion for caving. Outside of his adventurous, dedicated student at Leeds University, pursuing a degree in geology, he was fascinated by the underground world, spending countless hours studying rock formations and cave systems. The cavers aimed to discover uncharted areas and document their findings, contributing to the understanding and mapping of the cave system. The total length of Mossdale Caverns is approximately 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. This extensive cave system is renowned for its complex and narrow passages, which make it a challenging environment for even the most experienced cavers. It's a challenging cave system, even for the most experienced cavers. The group had explored many caves before, and they were excited about the adventure that lay ahead. They were well prepared with their gear and had planned their trip carefully. They packed their equipment, including ropes, helmets, and lights, and made their way to the entrance of Mossdale Caverns. The weather seemed fine, and they were eager to start their exploration. Little did they know, a storm was brewing that would change their lives forever. The group of 6 entered Mossdale Caverns with a sense of adventure. They carefully navigated through the entrance and began making their way deeper into the cave. The initial passages were familiar territory for them, and they moved confidently, chatting and laughing as they went. As they moved further into the cave, the passages became narrower and more challenging. They navigated through sections known as the Rough Gallery and the Far Marathon. These areas required them to crawl, climb, and squeeze through tight spaces. As the group went deeper into Mossdale Caverns, the passages got narrower and harder to navigate. They had to crawl on their hands and knees, sometimes even wriggling on their stomachs. Around 3 p.m., they heard a distant sound of rushing water. At first, they didn't worry, but the noise grew louder. The heavy rain outside was causing the water levels inside the cave to rise quickly. John Ogden, who was leading the group, saw the water rising fast. He shouted a warning to the others to turn back immediately. The passages they had just come through were now filling with water. They needed to get out quickly, but the way back was already becoming too dangerous, and they were at a distance of almost 3 hours from the entrance. As the rain continued to pour outside, the cavers inside Mossdale Caverns faced several severe problems. The rising water levels made it difficult to move through the narrow passages. The water was cold and fast-moving, creating strong currents that were hard to fight against. The cave's tight spaces became even more treacherous as they tried to navigate through them while partially submerged. The noise of the rushing water made communication difficult, adding to the confusion and panic. The cavers also had to deal with the psychological stress of being trapped in such a hostile environment. They were trapped in a rapidly flooding cave, and their chances of survival were decreasing by the minute. Realizing the water levels were rising, they tried to find higher ground within the cave to escape the flooding. They moved to the highest points they could find, hoping it would keep them safe until help arrived. Morag Forbes was a caver and a member of the Leeds University Speleological Association. On the day of the tragedy, she did not enter the cave with the 6 men, but stayed outside, monitoring the weather and the conditions of the cave. She played a crucial role in raising the alarm when the group did not return as scheduled, helping to initiate the rescue. The Yorkshire Cave Rescue Organization, led by experienced caver Bob Leakey, was called in to help. Rescuers arrived at Mossdale Caverns and immediately began their efforts to reach the trapped cavers. They faced the same challenges as the group inside: rising water levels, narrow passages, and the complex cave system. The rescuers knew they were racing against time, as the water continued to rise and the chances of survival diminished with each passing hour. As the situation became more dire, more experienced cavers and rescue professionals joined the effort. Bob Leakey was a legendary figure in the British caving community, known for his daring explorations and significant contributions to the sport. Born in 1914, Leakey began his caving career in the 1930s and quickly gained a reputation for his courage and skill. He was one of the founding members of the Cave Rescue Organization, CRO, in the UK, established to assist cavers in distress. Rescuers like Jim Eyre and Dave Adamson, known for their caving skills, arrived to assist in the operation. The rescuers faced numerous challenges. The heavy rain continued to pour, causing water levels in the cave to rise even further. They used pumps to try and lower the water levels in the cave, but the rain continued to pour, thunder rumbling, making it a losing battle. The team also considered using explosives to create new passages, but this was deemed too dangerous. Inside the cave, John Ogden and his team were struggling. They had been trapped for over 24 hours, and the cold water and cramped conditions were taking a toll on their bodies. The lack of food and sleep added to their exhaustion. Despite the dire situation, they tried to stay hopeful, knowing that rescuers were working tirelessly to reach them. On June 27, 1967, 3 days after the cavers became trapped, the rescuers made one final desperate attempt to reach them. Bob Leakey and Jim Ayer led the effort, determined to get through despite the dangerous conditions. They knew that time was running out, and every second counted. During the intense rescue efforts, the rescuers were able to reach as far as the rough gallery within Mossdale Caverns. This section, characterized by low, narrow tunnels, was one of the initial parts of the cave the trapped cavers had navigated. In one particularly dangerous section, Jim Ayer had to wedge himself against the walls to avoid being swept away by the current. The harsh reality was setting in that a successful rescue might not be possible. By the end of June 27th, the rescuers were forced to make a heartbreaking decision. They could no longer continue their efforts without risking their own lives. The rising water and hazardous conditions had made the cave too dangerous to navigate. On June 28, 1967, rescuers decided to stop their efforts. The conditions inside Mossdale Caverns were too dangerous. It was officially declared that the 6 cavers were presumed dead. This news was heartbreaking for their families, friends, and the caving community. The rescuers, including Bob Leakey and Jim Ayer, were deeply affected. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Mossdale Caverns was permanently closed to the public. A memorial plaque was placed near the entrance of the cave to honor the memory of John Ogden, Jeff Workman, Bill Frakes, Michael Ryan, Colin Vickers, and Graham Holmes. This memorial serves as a reminder of the brave cavers who lost their lives and the risks associated with cave exploration. The story of the Mossdale Caverns tragedy is not just about loss, but also about the courage and resilience shown by both the trapped cavers and the rescuers. It teaches us the importance of meticulous planning, the need for proper safety protocols, and the value of teamwork in the face of adversity.